Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm Alex Epstein. Today's topic is triumphing over distraction. This is something I've been thinking about a lot ever since this massive coronavirus-related disruption, including the lockdown connected to it, began a month and a half, almost 2 months ago now. I've noticed, and I think a lot of other people have noticed, it's a lot easier to get distracted, particularly maybe above all, to get distracted from the core of our lives by continuous commentary on COVID-19. But I think there are a whole bunch of reasons, and I won't focus on this show, but I think a lot of us have had the experience of feeling easily distracted. It's harder to focus on things. It's harder to prioritize. And I've been thinking for weeks and weeks and weeks, I need to improve my ability to avoid distractions. I need to get that to a new level. It's something I'm generally good at. I was good at in the old normal, but in the new normal, it was really a recurring challenge. And I could just see, this is not something that I want to continue the way it's continuing. And so how do I avoid it? And so this episode is about some thinking I've done, some concepts I've developed, and some strategies I've developed, or at least tactics I've developed to triumph over distraction. And the main thing, as I'll explain, is a new way, at least for me, of thinking about distraction. I think thinking of it as distraction is often too benign, and I'll talk about why what I usually call distraction, I now think of as escape, and why that's a lot more clarifying for me and a lot more powerful for me. But I'll start out with a little bit of background, and I assume that some of this will be familiar to you, but I'll just share my own experience, which is what I call the vicious cycle of overcommitment and distraction. So particularly at a time like this, I find it easy to overcommit to things because there's existing things that I'm already doing, and then new ideas that I'm pursuing, and new opportunities that come up. And I find, okay, I've committed to a lot of stuff, and I'll have the experience of feeling overwhelmed. I have too much to do. Now, that's not really an accurate feeling because we just have as much time as we have, and it's not like I'm actually going to run out of food or water or something like that, but it's a psychological feeling, and part of it comes from, okay, I've overcommitted myself. I've said to myself and others, I'm going to do all of these things, and I don't really have those fit in time. I don't have what I sometimes call calendar comprehensiveness. And I notice that if I'm in that state of overwhelm, it's very easy and tempting to seek what I usually think of as a distraction. So, for example, there are some COVID commentators that I really like this guy Alex Berenson on Twitter. And I'll think, okay, gosh, I've got a lot going on. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. Let me just take a little break. And that seems innocuous because, oh yeah, well, I deserve a break. And then I go there, and then what happens? Well, one thing is it's easy to go down a rabbit hole and spend more time there than I thought. So at the very least, I've committed to, I felt like I didn't have enough time to do what I wanted to do or what I'd committed to doing. And now I've spent more time on this one thing. And then there's also just a feeling of, okay, now my focus has dissipated. My mind is more frazzled. It has more things on it. So it's going to be harder to execute. But maybe the biggest thing that I've noticed lately is that when I am in one of these distracted states, I'm much more vulnerable to committing to more things. So if I'm in a state where I'm looking at this, or maybe I'm looking at email or looking at social media, checking in on any of these things, it's not just doing that ever, because I think sometimes that can be really constructive, but it's doing that whenever there's this kind of feeling of overwhelm. When I'm in that kind of distracted state, or seeking that kind of distraction, I'm much more vulnerable to committing to more things. So let's say somebody says, oh, I want to interview you on my podcast. And I'll say, yeah, sure, just pick a slot next week. But at the same time, part of the reason I'm in this distraction is I feel like, oh, I've committed to doing too much. And so there's just this feeling of, yeah, let me just say, so now I commit to a new thing, and then what happens? Well, once I get out of the distraction, then now I've committed to new things, so now I'm even more overwhelmed. So that's why I call it the vicious cycle of overcommitment and distraction. So I'm committed to a lot of things. I feel overwhelmed. I seek a distraction, and then I end up committing to more things, and then it's more overwhelmed, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, how do we overcome this? And I found it surprisingly hard to overcome until I started thinking about related experiences I've had where I've overcome this kind of thing. And one situation that I think about a lot and that I may have talked about on this podcast is the phenomenon of specifically when I eliminate all digital distractions for a few days. So I'll have this sometimes on vacations, sometimes I'll do a whole weekend with it. And I always tell people, if you do this, it's so surprising. You to just put your phone away, make yourself inaccessible, and even if you don't have a plan, just go for a walk for a couple hours. But even not just a couple hours, just have for a couple days that you're not allowed to have any of these kinds of digital stimulation, digital distractions. And I find that what happens is, at first, there's a little bit of relief maybe, but sooner or later what happens is there's just this question of, well, what am I going to do? And it's not just this issue of, oh, I'm bored, I don't have anything besides these digital distractions. I find that it pretty quickly gets into what I would call higher altitude things, such as, what am I going to do like with my life? And it gets pretty quickly to, am I doing the things that I want to do in my life? And what am I ultimately after? So I'd put it in the category of purpose and priorities. So thinking about, okay, what am I doing? What do I want to do? What don't I want to do? Why do I want to do all of this stuff in the first place? And it's this really interesting phenomenon of the more I'm away from these distractions, the more I get into this prioritization mode, including thinking about the purpose behind it. And part of that is I start thinking about, okay, what do I want to cut out? Because I'm very aware in these moments of, okay, life is finite. I only have so much time. I can't do everything. And if I try to squeeze too many things in, that diminishes the experience of everything. So what are the relatively few things that I want to do and why? And that's this position of high altitude. And then, so noticing that when I'm out of the distracted mode, the thing that I do is the opposite of overcommitting. It's prioritizing. So it's actually helping dramatically resolve the overcommitment or at least non-optimal commitment that often happens in our lives. So I started thinking, okay, well, what if I applied this on a more micro level? So of course, I can take a digital detox or whatever people want to call it for a few days. But what if when I have this feeling of being overwhelmed, what if I recognize that and then I deliberately say, okay, now is the time to prioritize. Now is the time to think about what do I want to do and when. And part of that is scheduling. So thinking about, okay, and this is not super long-term stuff. This is saying, okay, in the next day, 2 days, 3 days, a week, what am I actually going to do and what am I actually not going to do? And that includes, well, what maybe did I think I was going to do or want to commit to that I'm not going to do, or are there any commitments I can negotiate? But when one is feeling overwhelmed, if one can get out of that and get into this prioritization and scheduling mode, then that has the exact opposite effect of the distraction. It doesn't lead to more commitment. It leads to less commitment and a big optimization of commitment. So when I started doing this, I noticed, wow, I'm getting much better at prioritizing things because I'm really inventorying what is it that I've committed to doing. And then I'm committing to, well, if I'm going to do it, it has to go somewhere in time. So then I put it in the calendar. And then I get real about, okay, when am I going to do these things? And why am I doing these things? And which of these things do I really not want to do? Even if they're things that are nice in the abstract, if I had infinite time, maybe I do them, but I don't have infinite time, so I don't want to do them. And I just noticed that on a day-to-day basis, sometimes even multiple days, I'm prioritizing. And it doesn't mean that I'm spending hours interrupting myself to get prioritized, because that's counterproductive for reasons I've discussed on another podcast. You don't want to be spending the time split between what am I doing and what am I going to do, and then the execution of it. I generally like having those things split out in terms of big planning sessions and big execution. But in between things, or particularly if I feel overwhelmed, that often means I haven't really planned it out properly. And so I at least want to do like a minimum viable plan for the next day, next 2 days, depending on the situation, so that I can move forward. And so that I actually have a match between what I've committed to and what I'm actually going to do. And the experience that I think most of us will have early on is, at first, this is a daunting thing, because it requires confronting the reality of overcommitment or non-optimal commitment. But to commit to prioritizing and scheduling when feeling overwhelmed, it just has this incredible focusing benefit. And it really leads to an aversion to agreeing to things one doesn't really want to agree to. I have an episode about, no means yes, I think is the title. But it's about how just saying yes to saying yes to one thing means saying no to everything else you could be doing during that time. And saying no to something just means saying yes to something that you want to do more of that. But the key is, in this situation of feeling overwhelmed, just having this idea that, I don't want to get distracted. I want to prioritize. And it might be I need to relax or something like that, but that's very different than jumping into some distracting form of stimulation. It's very different than meditating or something, because there one is just clearing one's mind or relaxing one's mind, but one is not trying to divert it. And this goes to my next point, which is how can I make it easier to do this? How can I make it easier to deal with overwhelm in a constructive way versus a destructive way? And one of the things I've found most helpful, really the thing I've found most helpful, is to reconceive distractions as escapes. Because the term distraction can sound pretty innocuous for a bunch of reasons. So it seems like, it's just a little distraction, and that seems innocent. And in particular, because we often think about a distraction as distraction from work, there's this idea, we can't be working all the time. I can't be focusing all the time. So I need to take a break. I need a little distraction. But I want to separate the situation of, I want to spend time, and even a lot of time, recreating and rejuvenating, with I want to escape my state of overwhelm and not deal with it. And that's why I think of when I'm talking about distractions here, I think a better term is escape, because it's really saying I want to escape from my life choices. I don't really know how to manage them. I've committed to too many things, so I need to get away from those. So you can think of it as, when I'm overwhelmed, going to Facebook just to see what's happening, or to see if anything new came in on email, those kinds of things, those I regard as escapes. Versus if I go on Facebook once a week to catch up with friends, that can just be a constructive recreational experience. So it's not about Facebook good, Facebook bad. It's about Facebook used as an escape. And in my experience, some of the most powerful changes just come from reconceiving things, because once we reconceive things, they have implications. So one of the episodes I've gotten the most positive feedback is the one about how, I think it's titled "No News is Good News," but it talks about how to conceive of news in a way that, you can listen to the episode, but in a way that will give you an aversion to it, and really think about it as, oh wow, this is somebody else's agenda really controlling you. It's not just, an innocent, nice thing like the news. And similarly, if I think of this as, okay, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, do I want an escape, or do I want a distraction? If I think distraction, that sounds pretty constructive, whereas escape sounds evasive, which it actually is. So that I think is the most important thing, is just thinking of it as, what I want when I'm feeling overwhelmed is not to escape from my life. What I want is to prioritize my life, including to schedule my life. And so that's the concrete action, but just conceiving of it as an escape, I'm finding very, very helpful, because it makes these courses of action, it takes away a lot of the rationalization of it. It makes me say, oh yeah, what? Yeah, I was just escaping from that, and that's not going to make the issues go away. Whereas if I respond to this by prioritizing and scheduling, then I'm going to build my life into a simpler and better entity. I'm going to say no to more things. I'm going to be saying yes to more of the right things. I'm going to be aware of just the quality of my life in terms of not jamming things too much together. But because I have full awareness of my priorities, and I'm seeking that. And when I'm feeling that overwhelm, I know, okay, I need to improve at prioritization. I don't just need to escape the situation and then be even less prioritized by doing something I didn't plan to do and committing to new things that are going to make me feel even more overwhelmed on the other side. So those are the big concepts for today. A couple of other tools, or a couple of tools that can be helpful here, I'll just mention. So one is something I've talked about several times on this show, and I introduced it on episode 3, the positive focus tool, or the positive focus exercise, which I learned from Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, and I talk about that in episode 3. That can be a great thing for prioritization and more broadly for reflection in times of overwhelm, because what it helps do is say, hey, here's what my victories are, and in reflecting on the victories, I can think about, okay, this was important versus this wasn't that important, and then here's what I want to prioritize next. And it also just gives one a little bit of a confidence bump, thinking about, okay, look, I've accomplished stuff. I'm ahead of the game. I'm ahead of where I was yesterday, and that counteracts the overwhelm and helps with clarifying priorities for the future. Another valuable tool is just to have some sort of later file. So just when an idea occurs to me, like for me, I'm a little bit of a junkie, not too bad, but a little bit of a junkie for jiu-jitsu news. So if I have some idea about, hey, I wonder what this guy's been up to, just put that in the later file. And then I can have a time set aside every day or every week even for looking at that. But the pull of these things is often much less later. But sometimes it's still there. So it's nice to have a thing queued up of interesting things for times when I'm more tired or just want to relax. So it ends up being much better, but it's helpful to have that file so one doesn't have the feeling of, oh, I need to do it now because I might forget about it later. No, don't forget about it. Just put it in the later file and then see what happens. And I don't mean this as a file for tasks that one can do, although you can have a someday maybe type thing, which David Allen of Getting Things Done is big on. I just mean specifically consumption experiences. So that would be interesting, great, put it in the later file. And then the final thing, if you can do it, which is really powerful, is reconciling one's calendar. So you could think of in accounting, reconciling one's books in that getting, I think that's the technical term, getting one's books accurate, accounting for one's income and spending in the past. Well, you could think of that with a calendar too. If we calendar forward, which I generally do, we put what we intend to do, but then reconciling it is, what did we actually do? And if you can do that on a 30-minute basis, or better yet, a 15-minute basis, that's very powerful. And that is even a good thing to do in moments of overwhelm. Just think about, okay, what have I actually been doing? And it can be humbling, because it can be, oh my gosh, I thought I was writing this thing for 3 hours. I had that all neatly blocked out. And then it could be even, I just spent 15 minutes writing out my ideas for a Human Flourishing Project episode. And maybe that's what I want to do, but I like having that kind of accounting there so I can see, what did I really do? So not the easiest thing to do, but it is a powerful thing to do, and it's another go-to type of thing to do in overwhelm. So when I'm experiencing overwhelm, I like to think of prioritization, scheduling, if I need it, rejuvenating, even maybe if I need a long enough break, some sort of diverting recreational activity. But nothing where I'm really escaping. And part of the escaping is getting into some new form of mental stimulation that really involves escaping from reality. And I don't know all the guidelines of how to avoid that, but I think we know it. just, we have this feeling of, yeah, this is really an escape versus no, this is relaxing my mind so that it can be even better at prioritizing and executing in my life. So that's today's episode, triumphing over distraction. I'm having some success with these techniques and concepts. I hope you do as well. I know that in this time, for so many of us, being distracted is so difficult. And part of what I want to emphasize today is it's even more destructive than we think. It's part of why I've been thinking about it so much. I just think, you know what, if I could just avoid these distractions, if I could only control that variable, so many things would inevitably get better. Because if I'm really thinking at high altitude about what I'm doing, when, and why, then I'm going to end up making a lot of good decisions, and executing really well on a lot of things. But if I'm not doing that, then it's just so easy for life to slip away and to think, yeah, what did I do? What did I do with that day? But not just, oh, I spent it all on Facebook or something, but just even the projects I pick, the tasks I pick, they're just not picked from a place of high altitude because I'm just too much in this overwhelmed / escaping mode. So for those of you who have had challenges with this, I hope you view, in a sense, the challenge as even bigger, as even more of a problem, but also that this points a way toward the solution. So that's the message for today, triumphing over distractions, and above all, reconceiving of distractions, reconceiving them as escapes, and then thinking of it as, when I'm overwhelmed, I don't want to escape from it. I want to reflect. I want to prioritize. I want to schedule. If you have any questions, as always, or comments or love mail or hate mail, you can email me at alex@alexepstein.com to get weekly updates about when the show comes out. Go to humanflourishingproject.com. You can join the discussion at our Facebook page, facebook.com/humanflourishingproject. And if you like this show and you want to pay for it or support it in one form or another, one thing you can do is just share this episode or some specific episode with somebody else. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on these episodes, but I don't advertise this very heavily, so it'd be great if you could advertise it for me. Also, if you want to pay actual money and you really get a lot of value from this, you can go to paypal.me/humanflourishing. All right, that's it for this week. I am still planning on doing another workshop soon. I've gotten some notes from some of you about wanting to do another live workshop. That'll happen in the next couple weeks. I'm going to keep trying to do episodes, though, no matter what, every week, at least as long as we're in this period of disruption, because I think it's helpful for a lot of listeners, and it's helpful for me to think through these things and to share my latest findings and latest experiences. So thanks for listening. I'll be back next week. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.